Of all the world's continents, Australia may be the smallest, but it's also the only one to be entirely controlled by just a single country. Almost everybody knows, though, that while Australia is a huge place in terms of land, it's also a pretty small place in terms of population. But few people really understand the absolute scale of how sparsely populated the Australian continent actually is. To help put the numbers into some perspective, Australia is of a comparable size to the lower 48 US states. These 48 US states have a population of more than 300 million people, while Australia only has a population of little more than 26 million. This means that there are two American states that have more people than the entirety of the Australian continent. California with more than 39 million, and Texas with more than 28 million. For a more European perspective, the population of only England, without factoring in any of the rest of the UK, is more than double the entire population of Australia. Despite being an entire continent, there are actually 7 significantly smaller islands across the world that have higher populations than Australia. Great Britain, of course, along with Honshu, Luzon, Mindanao, Java, Sumatra, and Madagascar. Java alone has nearly 6 times Australia's tiny population, despite being an island that is 60 times smaller than Australia, the continent. But it still gets even crazier because there's also a bunch of cities across the world that, right now, have more people than the entire continent as well. The Tokyo, Jakarta, and Delhi metropolitan areas all have greater populations than the entirety of Australia, while the Shanghai and Seoul metro areas have roughly similar populations. Sao Paulo, Mexico City, New York City, Cairo, Lagos, Mumbai, and Moscow all have largely comparable metropolitan populations to Australia as well. And all things considered, Australia really only has 5 actual major cities across their continent: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide, which collectively account for the residences of nearly 2 out of every 3 Australians. Australia is therefore among the most heavily urbanized nations in the world, with the overwhelming majority of the population, around 90%, concentrated into relatively small urban areas that only account for 0.22% of Australia's total land area, with half of the overall population living within just these red areas, and the other half almost entirely living in these blue areas. Overall, around 85% of all Australians live within just 50 kilometers of the coastline, meaning that there's hardly anyone deeper into the continent's vast interior. This unique population distribution creates a lot of fascinatingly bizarre situations across the continent. For example, this is the Shire of East Pilbara in Western Australia. It is roughly the same size as Japan, but there's only a bit more than 10,000 people who live here, and half of them just live right here in the town of Newman. It's basically just a small town, but with the space of Japan. Then, perhaps even more strangely, there's the pastoral unincorporated area down here in South Australia. This dot is the city of Adelaide, Australia's 5th largest city, home to more than 1.3 million people. And immediately adjacent to this oasis of urban life is the pastoral unincorporated area, a territory that's roughly the size of France, but is only home to a whopping 3,750 people, making the population density something like 178 square kilometers of land for every 1 person. That is roughly 1 Aruba's worth of land for every single resident inside of the pastoral unincorporated area.